Well, up until the age of 26, I was a perfectly convinced atheist, and I hated religion, really. I didn't like being dragged to church when I was a kid. When I was a teenager, I went to a church school, and the people that really irritated me the most were the other Christians. And I thought that Christians were smug and naive, and just hadn't thought through what they were saying, because how could you possibly, really believe these things if you thought about it? And I didn't want to be any of those things. I wanted to be, smart. I wanted to live an authentic life and kind of live with the harsh reality of the world as it was. And I went to university, and I thought, I've got a really good grasp on why I'm doing life and what I want from life. And I started my career, and I never thought about it again, really. And then when I was 26, my wife and I decided to get married, and we thought that we should do it properly, really. And we wanted to get married in a church because it's a pretty venue, and we knew that our parents would kind of appreciate it being done in church. So that's what we did. And we had some friends in the church who offered to do marriage preparation with us. And we decided to do that because they were sort of family friends. And we said to them, okay, well, we'll do that, but we don't want you to talk about the Bible or about God. We just want to focus on getting married. And they were sort of true to their word, really. And we had a great time, and we learnt a lot from this couple. And they never really needed to talk about their faith, because it was just so obvious to me that their faith was a huge part of what made their marriage successful, and made their life fulfilled and meaningful. Our wedding was amazing. The vicar who married us sort of treated us as if he'd always known us, and it was just such an amazing day. So when I came back from our honeymoon, I thought, I wonder if there is something in this, and I was interested in this idea of grace, and it sort of had struck me that I didn't really deserve the love that people had shown us in getting married, and I didn't deserve the love of my wife and that sort of thing. So I was really interested in grace, and that made me want to have a look at Jesus again. And I sort of watched some videos online, and I read a couple of books, and eventually I was reading a book called Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, and I just sort of went through it bit by bit, and I felt like I was having a chess match with a grandmaster, and eventually he kind of won me over, and I felt like, oh, checkmate, I think this is probably true. And that's really what led me to Christian faith, is that mix of a real lived experience of grace, the welcome of the church, and the wisdom of the church and people who are living out their faith, and then a couple of really good arguments that C.S. Lewis makes that I just couldn't really refute. And I just came to the conclusion that this is true. And once you've made that realization, you've either got to go on as if you don't think that, or you've got to come clean before God and say, yeah, I think this is true, I think this happened. And that's what I decided to do. Since I've become a Christian, my whole life has changed, really. And some things happened really quickly. So I dropped some bad habits that I wasn't very happy with quite sort of quickly, within sort of weeks of becoming a Christian. And then after that, I was just so excited to read the Bible. I was so interested in theology. I read a lot of books. And I just went on this amazing journey of just discovering more and more that the Christian faith has to offer. And then obviously, I ended up getting ordained. That was a real surprise. It seems like a bit of a practical joke that God's played on me. I never would have thought I'd be doing this. And if you told me when I was a teenager that I'd be eventually one day getting ordained in the church, I would have laughed, I think. And so there's just so much around you when you're part of a church community that can help you to kind of look at what's that next little bit that's going to, resolve a question that you might have. What are some ways in which you can start to live out this faith that you have? And that's been really important for me. So I would say to anyone who thinks that they can't have a faith in God, that I always said, I wish I could have a faith in God, but it's just not me. And I thought it wasn't possible for someone like me to, come to believe that God is real, that Jesus really is who he claims to be. I was the least likely person to end up with one of these collars on. I was the person who hated church. I was the person who, really didn't get on with Christians. I thought, I didn't like any of them. I was the person who knew all the arguments against God, and I'd read The God Delusion when I was a kid and all that sort of stuff. And God still found a way to make himself real in my life. And so I would just encourage people, to just ask the question, ask the question. You will probably know someone in your life who is a Christian, and ask them, why are you a Christian? How did that happen? And you'd be amazed how, as you start to look into this story about Jesus and ask the tough questions, how it starts to make sense. It starts to make sense. This isn't a faith for fools and idiots. This is a hard-headed faith that makes a lot of sense. It transforms our life and it's changed the world. So I would encourage you to just ask the question and explore. So that's my story. That's what happened in my life. But what's your story? Why don't you share some of your story?